Well, good morning. My name is Matt. I'm with TopLeft. We also have Chris Timm here of Sondela Consulting. Want to welcome everybody who's joining. We'll just wait 30 seconds while a few people come in, and then we'll get started.
Matt, I see that Gareth Brown has got his hand raised, so I can't seem to access anything. Oh, I think he's put it down.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't used Zoom webinars before, there's he's waving. Yeah. There's a couple of functionalities here. You can do chat, so you can chat to everybody, or just chat to us. You can raise your hand, and that means that we'll call you out for a question. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat anytime. We will be ending up with a question and answer session, and this is going to be recorded too. So everybody, whether you're here at the moment or not, you'll get a follow-up email with recording, so you can share it with your colleagues. Okay, well, why don't we start? So yeah, again, my name is Matt Fox. We're with TopLeft. So we are a unit of an MSP, as I think a lot of you know, Kirchhoff Technologies near Vancouver in Canada. And you know, as an MSP, we were using ConnectWise, and we're not satisfied with the visualizations of the work going on, service and project work that ConnectWise was giving us. So we built Kanban boards for ConnectWise, and we used it ourselves to really to make our workflows better. Now we offer it for Autotask as well, and yeah, so we help MSPs get better workflows. That's one way to put it. And we also have Chris Timm here. Chris runs Sondela Consulting out of the UK. He's also the author of the book PSA Profitability. He's operated at MSP, worked at Autotask, and now he teaches MSPs how to use their tools more effectively. So this is going to be about, Chris is going to teach us how to use kind of key configurations in your in your PSA, really focusing on either ConnectWise or Autotask, and things like the queues or boards and statuses, and how to best set that up for good workflows, especially with regards to using it in Kanban. And then, as I mentioned, we'll end with a Q&A session. So Chris, why don't you maybe introduce yourself a little more and then get started?
Cool, thanks. Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. So yeah, as Matt said, my name's Chris Timm. I'm from a company called Sondela Consulting, based in the UK, and recent author of the book PSA Profitability, which kind of does what it says on the tin. It's all about getting the best out of the PSA tool from a profitability perspective. And as Matt said, I ran an MSP business. I sold that business back in 2012. I then went to work at Autotask in the UK, headed up their pre-sales and post-sales teams. And then later, you know, about 3.5 years ago, I started up as an independent PSA consultant, specifically working with the Autotask product and working with MSPs to help them to get the best out of Autotask. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through talking about you know, focusing predominantly on the PSA and predominantly on the Autotask side. I know there are some ConnectWise users, so I'll try and, you know, as I'm talking about the stuff, I'll try and, you know, say how it's different or how it's similar in ConnectWise, and then hopefully go from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share out my screen. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, Matt, can you see that? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see the Autotask screen.
Cool. Okay. So, so I guess that means everyone else can see it. So, yeah, what we'll do after this, as Matt said, we'll make this, you know, have a Q&A session afterwards. And so feel free to ask any kind of questions or just ask them in the chat, and Matt can address them as we go through. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, this is Autotask for those who haven't seen it. Autotask allows you to pretty much customize the system in any way that you want in accordance with your workflows. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through here and look at things like ticket queues and ticket statuses. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, some of the things that I see MSPs where they go wrong with setting queues and statuses up. So Autotask speak, we talk about queues. In ConnectWise, we talk about boards. So fundamentally, they're the same thing, just ever so slightly different terminology that we use in Autotask. So this is probably a typical view that you're going to see for most MSPs. So out of the box, Autotask is going to give you hundreds of different queues, literally for almost everything you could ever possibly think of. So you can see in here, we've got a level 1 and a level 2 support queue. We've also got a queue specifically for monitoring alerts. And then a bunch of software level 1 and software level 2. For some unknown reason, they figured that this was a great idea to have this many queues. Now, when I talk to MSPs, I always say try and keep this as simple as possible, right? You really don't need to have, 25 queues in your business unless you had a process that specifically needed you to have that amount of queues. What I very often see is I see smaller companies that have guys who perform a level 1 and a level 2 type role, and what they end up doing is those same guys work on both of those kinds of tickets, and then they still end up having a level 1 and level 2 support queue. So I always say what we can do is simply get rid of those and have a queue called support, and just put everything that you're working on in your working queue into support, and not have level 1 and level 2. The only reason you need to have a level 1 and a level 2 support queue, is if you had a team or a person that was dedicated to doing that type of work. So, if you had a specific level 2 support team that you didn't want anyone in level 1 to be able to see those tickets that are sitting in that queue, or you wanted to escalate them into somebody in that department, then by all means go ahead and set up a level 2 support queue. But if you're a smaller team and everyone's kind of doing everything, then just keep it really simple, have one queue and call it something like support.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, that kind of comes down, well, like Kanban has a few things to say about that. I mean, like the way you presented it, like obviously a good practice in, Kanban is not just about, what most people know are the Kanban boards and the visualizations and whatnot, but Kanban actually has a lot more to say even about like waste and doing things efficiently. And in Kanban, think that what you've described is basically just not wasting work, because if you have more queues than you really need, or more boards, or basically more work that you have that's not really adding value, such as moving a ticket from one queue to another, because it seems complicated, but it's still actually the same people doing the work, that really serves no purpose. And so it's much better to just keep it simple. You can always make it more complicated as you grow, but if you do more than you need right now, that is wasteful and it's going to hold you back.
Absolutely, Matt. And the other thing is that it just adds, well, firstly, it adds a huge level of complexity. As you say, what's the point of putting a ticket into a level 2 support team if the same guys are just going to go to that queue and access the tickets, right? Firstly. And secondly, it also means the tickets get lost easier, right? Because you'll always have people who will focus on a particular queue. So they'll always live in level 1 support queue and they'll move something to level 2. And then they'll never look at the level 2 support queue, all of that kind of stuff. So, keep it as simple as you possibly can. And, by all means have multiple queues, but just think about them and make the queues something that is actually going to be of value to your business, that you're actually going to be needing and working with all the time. The other thing you can see in here that, we have a queue called triage, and I'm a really, really big fan of kind of triage tickets. And again, specifically if you had a dispatcher or a triage team, where everything comes into the triage queue to start with. And then what you can do from there is you would have your dispatcher, perhaps somebody who maybe isn't a technical person, but they're just the person who is creating the tickets or responding to tickets. And all they're going to do is they're going to assign it to a particular engineer and then drop it into the level 1 support queue. So I kind of always like to think about that as a hospital. You kind of go into the ER or A&E in the UK, and you kind of sit in the waiting room until the doctor comes to see you. But the nurse is attending to you, or the admin staff are attending to you while you're sitting in the reception waiting for the doctor. And then you go into the doctor's room and they fix your problem, whatever that problem has. And it's very, very similar to this with queues. Kind of put everything into a waiting queue, and only when you're actually starting to work on it, then you put it into one of those working queues. The other time I would actually have different queues as well is something along the lines of monitoring alerts. So again, you might want to, even if you're a small team and you have, like a support queue, and then you have a triage queue, potentially, you might also want to have a separate queue for monitoring alerts, or a separate board for monitoring alerts. And the reason I would do that, again, is very simply that, you don't want all of the noise that comes out of your RMM tool to kind of get mixed up with all of that work that you're currently doing for customers. So, I'm a very big fan of kind of keeping that stuff separately. And what I've seen very often, and this particular database I'm using doesn't have that, but I see people create different queues for every single RMM tool that they have. So they'll have one for, Datto RMM, and they'll have another one for Orvic, and they'll have another one for Continuum, and they'll have another one for, every other tool that they're using. Again, that just adds way too much complexity. What you want to do is have one queue called monitoring alerts. And the only time you would potentially need another queue like Continuum is if you were outsourcing that service to them, then you could drop a ticket into that queue. But otherwise, there's really no point in having multiple queues for that kind of stuff. Just keep everything in the monitoring alert queue. And then what you can start to do is you can then use things like issue types and sub-issue types. And in the new order task as well, you can use ticket tagging, which allows you to tag those tickets further. So you can still report on it. So you can then say anything that's sitting in the support queue is tagged as a server issue or a whatever it is, and you can report on it from there. Okay, so did you have anything else to add on that, Matt?
Yeah, maybe let me just quickly show the ConnectWise side.
Okay, yeah, if
for
you want to.
anybody who's not familiar with that, hasn't seen that before. If there's even anybody, I think this is probably a lot of you have seen it, but if not, this is where you come to set up the boards. That's ConnectWise terms here. So you come under System, Setup Tables, it gets you in here, and then you're gonna have to search for the right setup table. Easiest way that I know of to do this is to just search for boards here, and then we'll bring up the project board setup table and service board. So that's one difference between ConnectWise and Autotask in terms of the queues and the boards, is that, now correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but queues are only for service. They don't really have an equivalent for project work. Whereas ConnectWise does kind of keep the board idea for projects as well. So you can actually have multiple ways to set up your projects in ConnectWise, or multiple boards if you're doing a variety of different types of projects. I think that would be something that only a larger MSP would probably need to use. But anyway, your project boards, if you want to use multiple boards for organizing projects there, and then service board. And this is mostly equivalent to those queues in Autotask. We don't have all the examples, same examples set up, but this is where you would come in ConnectWise to see that.
We should have synced our databases, right, so that they look the same.
Yeah, you can share again, Chris. Cool. And now, one thing you had mentioned when we were talking yesterday is one other reason to use a special queue might be because if you have some automated workflows set up and you want to target that at a just a specific queue.
Yes.
How common is that? And what are some examples that you've seen of people doing that? So, I mean,
again, there's a bunch of reasons why that would and wouldn't be a good idea to do. Firstly, especially from an Autotask perspective, you can do workflow rules on kind of any status, any queue, any issue type and sub-issue type. So you don't often need to have a specific queue in order to workflow on it, right? What a lot of people do is they create a queue because they'll say, well, I then want to say if it's in this queue, then move it to a different queue, or assign it to a different engineer. You can still do that if it's inside the support queue by using things like issue types and sub-issue types. So you can say if it's in this queue and it's a server issue type, then assign it to this engineer. So you can do actually exactly the same thing. The only time actually, and in Autotask where again you might need to have a different queue is, which I don't think we've got set up in here, is if you've got recurring tickets. So for example, the way that Autotask works with recurring tickets is it creates all the instances of those recurring tickets in one go. So what you would then do is you would put those into a queue called recurring tickets, and then you would essentially not assign that queue to any engineers. So what that would be is essentially a hidden queue, if you like. And then what you would do is then you could have a workflow that would say, if something is sitting in the recurring tickets queue, then move it into the support queue, a day, an hour, a week, or whatever it is before that ticket becomes due. So that would be a good example of using a specific queue for a specific reason. But if it's just to do something like, if it's a server issue and send that over to a level 2 engineer, you can do that anyway with issue types and sub-issue types and ticket tagging and stuff anyway, even if it's inside the support queue. So I think what I know we've spoken quite a lot about queues, and what we're trying to get at here, I think, is just really think about how you guys work, what kinds of is everyone doing the same kind of work, and if that's the case, then build your queues according to to how you work, rather than just kind of having hundreds of random queues for random reasons. Now the other thing, and we'll get on to statuses very shortly, but I see a lot of people kind of using queues or confusing queues and statuses, so they kind of call them the same thing. So I've seen many people have a queue called waiting customer, and any ticket that's waiting customer they put into that queue, and then they workflow off that queue. Now again, that would be an example of a queue that's completely irrelevant, because you can still have them sitting inside your support queue and then trigger off the status that is waiting customer, and again trigger off the status of if it's a server issue, waiting customer, and it's a high priority, then trigger a workflow for whatever reason. But you don't need to have a specific queue for something that could actually be done as a status.
Yeah, because that customer responded or whatever is one stage in the workflow that a ticket goes through.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So if you think about statuses as the stage of the ticket, so they can still sit inside that queue or that board, but just have different stages of how you're actually working on the ticket. So for example, a ticket that comes in brand new from a customer is going to come in as the new status, and then typically what you're going to do is change that into some kind of working status, like in progress. And then you're going to go ahead and complete that. So you can see that what I've essentially done is I've color coded, except for the plan establish, that wasn't me, but I've color coded the ones that I think are statuses that most people need to use. So obviously the new status is new when a brand new ticket comes in, and then when a ticket starts to get worked on, when it gets assigned to an engineer, at that point you change it into in progress. And again, this fits in really nicely with Kanban, right? Because at that point you can then have a lane or a column on your Kanban to show you everything that's currently sitting in progress, and then you can drag it through the different lanes to change the statuses, etc., as you're working on it. So again, I see this so many times where people have different types of waiting statuses. So you can see here we've got waiting material, customer, vendor, waiting approval. A lot of the time these statuses could actually possibly be the same thing, because very often your chances are you're waiting for a customer for some kind of approval. So you don't necessarily need to have a waiting approval queue. Now, I know some people might argue that this is actually waiting approval from internal, But again, you can do that in a slightly different way. So you could either have an issue type or a sub-issue type, or you could just have the a note in the ticket saying I'm waiting for approval from somebody. So you don't necessarily need to have all of these waiting statuses. I would again just have one called waiting customer, and then maybe have an issue or sub-issue type, or even a user-defined field that says what you're actually waiting for that customer. Is that kind of how you were thinking of it as well, man?
Yeah. When we're talking with our customers at Kanban, typically I don't recommend they change too much about their waiting statuses. I usually just say, keep doing what you're doing, but you can put them into the same column in Kanban. Actually, I haven't even shown that, and some of you here may
yeah, why don't you show that, because I think that would
have actually seen that before or seen much of it before. So I'll just take over the share here and just quickly show that, so there's some context for anybody who's brand new to this. So this is a Kanban board, pretty typical. It's not exactly the same columns here that correspond with what Chris was showing, but it's really easy to set it up. So it's very, very flexible. Now, I mean, for anybody who's kind of new to this, hasn't actually used it in your own company, all the data that you see here, like in terms of the tickets and whatnot, that all comes straight out of your PSA, either ConnectWise or Autotask. And there's two-way synchronization going on here. So when you make a new ticket in ConnectWise or Autotask, it shows up on the Kanban board. You don't have to do anything else. When you make, and also like if you change a status on the ticket, it might move to a different column, because actually these columns are configured. You map them to the different statuses that you have in your PSA. You can map multiple statuses to one column even. Like this waiting one here, this, I could go in and look at the details, but probably it has, well, I can see it here actually. So this bit of text on the card says that is the name of the status that this ticket is actually in. So I can see that we've got a few mapped here, because it's, the column is called waiting, but it's got a ticket here in waiting approval, ticket here in waiting vendor, a ticket here in waiting customer. So that's how we've typically set it up. If you want to keep it even simpler, certainly you can only make use of one of those actual waiting statuses. Anyway, yeah, so the data goes both ways. So you can actually just pick up a ticket and move it across from, you say, ready over to in progress here. And because the columns are mapped to statuses, we actually can go out and change the ticket status in Autotask or ConnectWise. So it's done it already. Now it says in progress it tells us how long, because it's been in that status, because that's a pretty key bit of information for knowing if it's kind of getting delayed or not. But in progress for 0 minutes, because I just moved it. And if we went into Autotask, because this Kanban board is attached to our Autotask instance, we could go in and just click on the title of the ticket, and we actually see that in there, that it is in the in progress status. So that's just a very quick quick summary of what we're actually getting here with the Kanban boards.
Sorry, there was a quick question from Gareth Brown that I think is relevant to this that you were talking about. He said, can this view be used solely for a display board? So I guess that you're talking about a big screen.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. And well, I would say, I don't know of anybody who's using it only for that. That would be pretty unusual, because once you see this, you want to be able to pull it up on your desktop or your laptop at work, right? So I don't think there's anybody who's using it only for that. But we definitely do have customers who are using it for a big TV in their office. In fact, that's what we do at our MSP, or at least we did when people were still in the office. So people typically just email us and say, hey, we want to use it on a display board like that, and we just set up a special account for that, so you can actually have your own kind of login to the system just for that PC running that board. So yeah, absolutely, people do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's an office, right? Who knows what offices are these days?
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen the inside of my office. It's probably got spider webs in it by now. Kind of one of those ghost towns.
Yeah, there
So
was
there was
one other question. We
yeah.
can address it now or later. Michael had asked, can you see the?
Yes, I see that. So yeah, he's saying why not allow tickets to go direct into the support with a default status of new that indicates it needs triage. Exactly, Michael, you could do exactly that. So the idea of the triage queue is, again, if you have a slightly bigger team, that you might have a specific dedicated dispatcher that can move tickets in and out. But yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't have that ticket just go straight into the support queue in the status of new, and that indicates, as you say, that it needs to be triaged. The other reason for having it, though, and why I sometimes like it even for smaller teams, is it does kind of keep all the unassigned stuff out of the working queue. So, you know, if you think about your support queue as the queue of stuff that you actually physically working on, and all the new stuff is kept in a separate queue, that would be another reason for having a triage queue. But yes, it does kind of add a slight level of complexity that you may not need as a smaller company.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what we do at our MSP. So I know that like at least in one of our units, we do have a separate triage board. And so, I mean, well, I should say, like we do actually see a lot of MSPs that do just use a single queue or a single board. And, you know, the first stage is new and that's where things get triaged from. We do use a separate board for that, at least in one of our units. And the one benefit that I can think of is that it kind of, well, it's similar to what Chris has said, but sometimes it can help you catch, like sometimes you might have a lot of junk come in there, and that lets you filter it out before it gets to where the technicians are seeing it.
Mm. Yeah, and that's why I'm a big fan of a triage queue as well, exactly for that reason, because you know, it's kind of almost like your focus queue, right? This is the queue where stuff is actually being worked on. It's your, if you like, your working queue. And you know, having all the new stuff that's coming directly into that queue, whilst you can obviously put it into a column and you can sort by new or sort by whatever status you want. You know, and that's all very well and good. I'm kind of a big fan of saying, you know, keep your working stuff that you actually physically is in progress and you are working on in your working queue, your support queue, and then you know, everything else kind of kept separately. But there's no rules with any of this, right? There's no like you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. It's whatever sort of suits your business better and whatever suits you know, how your team likes to work. So yeah, so you can do it either way, really.
You can
Gareth had
share
another
again there if
question.
you.
Oh yeah, I was going to say Gareth had another question just while I'm sharing. He said, "How are the cards sorted on the Kanban view?" So I don't know if you want to jump back in and kind of show that, Matt.
Yeah, for Gareth's sake, I can answer that now. Sure, I'll share again then. Yeah, so how are they sorted? Well, that's a great question. And so at the moment, they kind of come when new tickets come in, meaning like Kanban first, you know, sees a new ticket that's been created in your PSA. By default, that's going to go at the bottom. So newer tickets appear at the bottom of whatever column it might appear in. Maybe I should explain the swim lanes too. So we offer these groups here. You can see these horizontal groups. You don't have to have this, but this is an optional way of showing the data, and it groups the cards by some property. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that you can choose to group these. So this one's using probably the most common way is by looking at who's assigned to the ticket. So actually we had here this swim lane. It's called no resource assigned, and all of these tickets don't have anybody assigned to them, which, you know, in thinking of triage or whatever, so that's going to be kind of normal when it's over here on the left side of the board, which is where things start. You know, probably, you know, maybe this is bad example data because you wouldn't typically have tickets that are in progress with nobody assigned, but like we know that sometimes that happens. So this could be with Kanban, this can actually help you catch those problems because you can really easily see tickets that are in progress with nobody assigned. Then we get swim lanes here for all of the people who have work assigned to them on this board. So, you know, Michael's work, Gary's work, and so on. So back to the question, how are they actually sorted? So the new ones come in at the bottom, whether, whatever status they happen to be in, and how those statuses are mapped to the columns will determine which column it appears in. And in this particular example, who it's assigned to will determine which lane it appears in. They are sorted manually right now. So basically, when they come in new, they'll be at the bottom. And then when you start dragging them around, then they'll stay where you put them. So earlier I had dragged this ticket over here and I had put it in the first position here. When they're showed side, like the ordering here is easy because it's just one column. But when we have space, then we show them side by side here just to make most use of your screen. So in this case, it's, this is the first position, second, third, fourth, and so on. So I dropped it here and it will stay there until someone moves it somewhere else. If I want to indicate the priority, and now not every MSP does this, and it's not so useful in the in progress column, but something that people find very useful is to use the ordering to indicate how engineers should work on it. So maybe not so common in the in progress column, but say in the ready column, if we wanted to just kind of get a queue of work and our engineers just work from the top to the bottom, we could actually use that to just drag, dispatcher, triage person could just drag these into the position that they want engineers to work on them. So you can do that here, like unassigned work. So if engineers come in and kind of claim their own work from the unassigned work, then you can order it here just by dragging and dropping, and they'll stay where you put it. Or if you are using a mode where somebody looks at a new ticket and says, okay, this is best for Michael, for example, then you can assign it. In fact, you can just drag it down to Michael's swim lane here, and then the triage or service manager, whoever, can actually drag tickets around in Michael's swim lane here to indicate for Michael the order that they should work. So it can be done manually, and in fact that's how it works right now. We're going to be making an update, it's in our plans for this quarter. I hope that we can get it in by the end of the year to set up some rules for automatic ordering. So you can say things like, I don't want to order them manually. I actually want to see them ordered by the priority of the ticket. So that's actually what you see here on the left bar here. So red tickets are going to be so this is critical, orange is medium, green is high. You'll be able to do things like say, I want to just make sure that they're always ordered by the ticket's priority. So we always see the highest priority tickets at the top, or the tickets with them the closest upcoming due date at the top, or a couple of other things. So that's something that's coming up in the future fairly soon.
Cool. All right. I don't see any other questions in there. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to share out the screen again and just talk a little bit more about the queues. And I think we've pretty much talked around how to set up statuses and queues and what have you. But just one of the things that, just coming back to one of those questions that was asked by Michael earlier on about queues or tickets going directly into the support queue with the default status of new. So what you could do at that point is bring it in as a new status, and then you could kind of even if it did come into I guess whatever queue it comes into, you can have some kind of automation around that could say, hey, if it's been sitting in the support queue for more than 10, 15 minutes, whatever the case might be, and it's still in the new status and no one's touched that ticket, then you can have it automatically, change status and assign it to an engineer. So that might be a way to kind of get around, somebody having to triage that ticket. I've seen a lot of people do that, where it still comes into the working queue and sits in the support queue. But what it then does is says, after an allocated amount of time, if no one's touched this ticket, auto assign it to an engineer. And again, if it was sitting in the triage queue and you didn't have a triage team, you could still say, if it comes into this queue, leave it for five minutes or so, and then move it into the support queue and assign it to an engineer. And you can even with Autotask do things like if it contains particular words. And this is another reason why I kind of have a triage queue, because you might say, if it's some kind of spam, so if it contains the word, sales, or even worse, something like Viagra, if we still get those kind of emails these days. But that kind of stuff, right? You can say if the ticket contains those words, then just close it straight away. So you don't then even need to see that in your working queue, in your support queue, because you can have a workflow that says, if it contains these words and it's in the new status and it's in a queue called triage, just close it. I'm not interested. I don't want to see that ticket. And that's another reason why you would kind of want to have that catch-all queue that isn't your working queue, and that gives you the ability to do that with statuses. And actually, at that point, you might want to, rather than just mark it as complete, you might want to mark that as complete spam or something like that, or just mark it as spam. And then you can then have a widget on your dashboard or some kind of report to show you all of the tickets that were completed as spam or something to that effect. So I see there's another question. So Michael said that's good advice. So and Gareth was saying an auto rule would be useful. So yeah, I mean, there's not really much more I can talk around statuses. So I think as far as me talking around how statuses work and queues and the difference between them, I'm pretty much done. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about on the Kanban side, Matt.
Yeah, and we're doing good for time. I think we can begin to wrap it up. I'll just show a couple of things in Kanban, and also look at the statuses here, how you do that for the ConnectWise users among us. So for modifying the statuses, you actually come in exactly where I showed you before, and into the service board or project board setup tables, and you navigate to the board you're concerned about, and here you have a tab for statuses, and then you can see everything that's available and add new ones. You can sort them by giving them certain numbers here to kind of indicate usually how does a ticket progress through these statuses. ConnectWise has a few options like, can you enter time on a ticket when it's in a certain status? You can set that up here. They also have a field here for closed, indicating that a status indicates a closed status. And so that's usually used for having multiple closed ones, like here, where we kind of we indicate that it's like, there's a few ways that a ticket can be totally done, but we want to indicate what was the actual result of that as it got done. So one is like, it's done because it was canceled and we actually didn't do it, or at least we didn't finish it, or it's canceled because it's resolved, and so that's obviously this is kind of the ideal scenario. That's kind of, honestly, that's more detail than I see a lot of MSPs using. I think it's totally fine to just have one closed status. That's good for most people, I think. What's more common, though, is that actually we see it here, to have a status called completed. And it's actually, as you can see here, it's not a closed status. And generally, that's what engineers would put a ticket to when they say it's, they assert that it's all done. Goes to the completed status, which is not a closed status. But then there's some sort of workflow, either manual or automated. Frequently it's like a billing sort of thing. Somebody goes and reviews the time entries on that and says, okay, that's all right, sends it to billing. And that's what actually bumps that over from the completed to the closed status. So that's not an engineer's workflow. That's more of a administrative or management sort of workflow that bumps it over to the closed status.
Mm. And I mean, again, on that, Autotask has the closed status of a ticket marked as complete, which is, then the ticket is completely complete. But that comes back to the thing I was talking about again, having multiple statuses. Again, for a smaller company, if you didn't have any level of approval, you probably don't need to have a ticket that says, I think this ticket is closed, and then have somebody actually say, yes, it's closed, because most engineers will say that the ticket is closed. And what you can then do is you can then alert the customer to say, we believe your ticket is closed. If you don't think that's the case, then reopen the ticket and tell us that it's reopened. So, and one of the things from an Autotask perspective, you can bill at any time, so you don't have to wait until the ticket is in a closed state in order to bill. You know, you could send that time entry through to billing, or it goes through to billing anyway, but you can bill for that time when the ticket is still new, for example. So it doesn't actually matter from a billing perspective. It's not like it has to be closed before the ticket can be billed. And they actually, just talking of all of that stuff now, they actually have some brand new stuff built into Autotask, which literally came out in the UK today, in fact. And I think last week or a couple of weeks ago in the US, where you know, you now have the ability to say, if a ticket is closed and marked as closed and the customer responds to the ticket, then don't reopen the ticket. So you can kind of leave it closed, and it then just adds a note to the ticket and alerts somebody to say, hey, the customer's responded to this, but don't reopen it, or don't automatically reopen it. And then what will happen is the engineer can then have the ability to say, yep, this actually should be reopened, and then reopen it at that point. So so again, that whole
for
thing
like
of
thank you tickets.
yeah, exactly. Which happens all the time, right? You send the customer an email and they go, "Thank you for letting me know," and it reopens the ticket. So you can actually prevent that from happening now. So you know, and you can set that to be a specific amount of time. So you could say, you know, if they say thank you within 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the ticket, then reopen it. But if they you know, say thank you, or even worse, they find an old ticket that's like 3 months old, and they use that as a way to create a new ticket for you, and then it reopens the old one. You can then say, all it'll do is send a note against that ticket to say, hey, the customer's responded to this ticket, or sent a note back against this ticket, and then allow you to manually go and reopen it. So that's kind of quite a neat new feature that Autotask has.
Yeah, that could be a whole webinar topic on its own. How do you handle responses to closed tickets?
Yeah. Well, I think that was one of the reasons they brought that out, right? So I think literally pretty much everyone was like, this is crazy, because tickets just automatically reopen. So it's now completely changed. So and the other thing is, actually, if we can just jump in very quickly, if I can start sharing the screen again. One of the things I wanted to show, and I know there's you know, we still got a bit of time, so it might be worth just showing this from a point of view of you know, ticket categories within Autotask. So what you can actually do at this point is you can create a category that can determine what statuses and queues you even show against that particular type of ticket category. So, you know, let's say in here, if I create a brand new ticket, what this is going to give you the ability to do is to, you can see in here, I've got almost every single status in here. So I might say, if this was a ticket for you know, a particular, maybe it was a password reset, I might not want to show every single one of these statuses. I might only want to show 2 statuses or 3 statuses. You can actually do that now in Autotask as well. So you know, from within inside this ticket category, you can very simply just go in and say, I only want to show so let's just go back to the standard category, come into here, and come on, there we go. And then what we can do is we can say, you know, for example, in here, I think it's back here. Sorry, it's actually is here, status, there it is. So what you can do is click against the edit field, and then you can click in here where it says available list values, and you can say, hey, the only statuses I want to see on this particular ticket category are, actually, if I make them all available, what I normally do is make them like that, and then I say the only ones I want to see is new, in progress, approved, and maybe complete, or something to that effect. So if you do that, then when you view this ticket category, what it allows you to do is to just show you know, only those statuses that you want. And that's actually another way to get around it, right? Rather than trying to clean up and remove every single status that you have. If you have hundreds that you don't use anymore, you can just do that and say, these are the only statuses that I actually want to show against this ticket category. The same thing you can do with queues. So here you can see every single queue. You can just go into this ticket category and say, you know, the only queues that I want to see are specific queues. And here we go. So I can choose which queue it shows. And again, can pick all of those, remove that one, and say I only wanted to show level 1 support queue. Okay, and what this will do is anyone who's using that particular ticket category, they will now only be able to drop a ticket into that queue. They won't even have the ability to move it into a different queue. You can see in here. Yeah, so this is another way to kind of get around this whole thing. If you've got hundreds of queues, rather than trying to clear up all of those queues or move things around, you basically can just do this with ticket categories and specify what queue and what status they go into. So I see that there was actually a question from Jeremy Wisner about can I provide more information on or documentation on the auto prevention in Autotask? Yeah, Jeremy, what you can do from within inside Autotask, if you just go, so I'm just going to move our pictures out the way. If you just go into the help file and go into the online documentation, what you can actually do in here, if you just type 2020.3, which is the new version number, so it's version 3 for the year 2020. What you'll see is it shows you in the release notes. And then for the release notes, if you click down into somewhere in here, there's actually a PDF document. Maybe it's, yeah, there's a PDF document that you can see in here. This is just showing the summary that will actually show you how to do that. I just want to see if it's in there. Here we go. It's actually here. Yeah. Then what you do is you go into the release notes here as a PDF. And what that will do is show you, I don't know why it's not showing me the PDF document, but there is a PDF. You can look it up in there, and it will show you all about it. Or I think you can just do. Actually, do you know what I'm going to do? Sorry, rather than just trying to show you this, Michael, I'll actually show you where you can change it. It's basically in your inside your email processor. If you go to application-wide settings, go to incoming email processing, then you pick the email processor that you have, and then let's just go. Oh, sorry, this database doesn't allow me to do it. Under the ticket note, Michael, there will be something in there that will allow you to change it. What I'm going to do quickly, sorry, I'm just trying to get this. I just really want to show you where this is. I think it's easier to show you. I'll just log into mine very quickly. So what we can do in here is if you click on admin features and settings, go to application wide settings, incoming email processing, and then pick the support queue that you want. Under the ticket notes, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, it's got this reopen prevention. And then in here, you can see enable reopen prevention. And then it says only send success notifications to the internal resource if reopen prevention occurs. And you can see in here, you can give it a grace period of say 5 days. So you can say, you know, don't prevent the ticket from being reopened within 5 days or whatever the case might be. So it's inside the email processing under the ticket notes tab all the way down at the bottom. It allows you to set that up. So yeah, or try and find, if you do the 2020.3 and you look up that the release notes, there is a PDF document that kind of explains what all the new releases were for this month, but that's pretty much where it is. So I hope that's helped. So that's it from me, Matt.
Cool. Yeah, this is good stuff. Thanks. I'll just show a couple of things very briefly here for anyone who hasn't used Kanban before. So I'll talk a little bit. Actually, I'll show you how we do that association of the statuses to the columns. So I just go and edit this board. Basically, this is a view that's for administrators, and it allows them to control which tickets actually show up on the board, what information shows up on each card, whether you want to have kind of a compact card with not so much data, but you can see more cards on the screen or larger cards, but so you can see fewer of them. You can set the swim lane here and the different fields that you can use for grouping them. And the applicable part here is this is how you build out the columns. So you can have any number of columns, and it's all very flexible. So you give it whatever name you want, and then this is how you just map the statuses to these columns that you've made. We have a section here, so initially this section has all of your statuses because you haven't mapped them when you're making a new board, and you can just drag them. I mean, it's pretty straightforward here. If you want to put tickets in the escalate status in the in progress column, then that's all you do. And you can drag them between the columns and put them back if that's not what you want to do. There's another thing as well that I wanted to mention, one thing that helps you see the difference between tickets that are, tickets that are moving well through your pipeline, they're getting handled at good times, they're not getting delayed. You don't want to have to worry about those ones. The technicians just work those ones, but you want to see those tickets where they are getting slowed down. So we offer the ability to set a threshold, either in terms of like minutes, if you're working really fast, hours or days is the most common to use. And you get something like this. So this column actually has a setting for that. And that's why we see the difference between this ticket and this ticket. This is the one I just moved 27 minutes ago. So that's fine. Now we've got a threshold, I think it was 3 days. And this one's been in progress in that status for more than the threshold, 5 days here. And so that's why we're showing it in red. So it's a real good way to be able to quickly identify the problem tickets, because that's how you make your workflows more efficient, is to actually get the better performance out of your, after you improve your workflows, is by identifying the actual problem tickets and dealing with those. So this makes it really easy to actually identify those. One little thing too, a lot of the things we've talked about are certainly, they're useful for engineers, but we're really talking more in terms of, management and whatnot. But there are some things here that engineers get a lot of benefit out of this too, especially when they can, they are certainly going to be dragging tickets around on the board. They can also enter time and notes right on the ticket here. And so that's something that allows them to do more on the ticket from Kanban without having to pop into Autotask or ConnectWise all the time to enter that time. So this screen this is what it looks like for the Autotask side. The ConnectWise time entry screen looks different, but the equivalent functionality is there. And one thing that I wanted to mention too, because this is relevant, like if you're going into your PSA and you're changing queues and boards and statuses and stuff like that, this is relevant when you're using Kanban, is that because that's not really a frequent job, you're not changing that sort of thing every day or even every week once you kind of settle in and you've got something you're happy with. So we don't, Kanban doesn't go and kind of fetch those changes out of the ConnectWise or Autotask API. It doesn't do that very often. I think every 4 hours. So now if you are going and changing those statuses and queues and whatnot, it means you might have to wait for us to actually reflect those changes in Kanban after you've made them in your PSA, except if you know about this function here. So if you're an administrator, you can come in, click admin, then synchronize data. So this is something where you can tell Kanban that you've made changes in your PSA and it's time you want us to go and fetch those right away. So you just click synchronize the configuration data and then click that. And that will, so it's not done yet, but it has triggered, kind of fired off a job to go and fetch that sort of, queues and statuses sort of information. And so in probably less than a minute, we'll see it all reflected there. So that's just a good tip to know about. Because we haven't, I don't know how many people actually know about this, because we haven't actually had this function for too long, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, but it's not something that we've had forever. So some people might not know about it. And yeah, I think that about wraps it up for me. I guess let's, their questions have been coming in throughout, but let's open it up to questions. Chris, unless there's any more that you want to say.
Can I just bring up one thing? It's kind of not really strictly related to this, but as we were talking about new features. I just wanted to point out to those Autotask people that are still left on the call.
Mm.
For those who may not realize with Autotask, let me just share out.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Just stop your sharing. So one of the things that Autotask has always done, for those Autotask users will probably, this will resonate with them, is it opens up a million different pop-ups. It opens up a million different screens. So they've actually brought out a brand new feature, or two brand new features in Autotask. So if you click up here on your name, for the purposes of this demo, my name's Pamela. So you can click on your name up here, and then what you've got is these two things here where it says use browser tabs or full browser windows instead of pop-ups, and open time entry windows and notes inside of the ticket window. So it docks the time entry inside the ticket window. These are two brand new things that just come out in Autotask, which I think is going to, it's probably one of the best things they've done for a very long time. And what that really means now is if I save this, and I open up a new something, you can see it opens it directly in a tab rather than opening it in a pop-up of some kind. So whatever it is that used to open up as lots of different screens, it's now opening in a pop-up. And then in the same way, when you go in and you try and add time to something, the time entry window is now docked inside the ticket screen as well. So if you actually open up this, that's fine. So if you do this, what this used to do is open up a completely separate window, and it still opens up a new window, but the window is docked inside here. If you wanted to open it as a completely new tab, you can do that, but by default, it opens it up inside that new window. So it's these two tabs here, or these two buttons here, if you're an Autotask person, I think is going to pretty much save a heck of a lot of frustration for those who don't like pop-ups. So that really is it from me.
Okay. Well, let's just stick around for another minute. If there's any other questions, otherwise that'll be it.
Don't see any more.
If not, thanks for attending. We'll get the recording out later today. I think we'll email out tomorrow the recording link. And appreciate everybody who came.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks so much.
Let's wrap it there.
Also send in any feedback if you have any ideas for other things you'd like to hear about, because we're always looking for specific requests about other topics that we can teach about. Anything that would be helpful. So let us know. Oh, I see something coming in. He's giving this question here.
So Michael Godwin said he's just bought the book. So thanks. So those of you that are actually still on the call, you can see behind me. Sorry, I meant to say this. I did publish a book, and I hope Matt will just allow me a few minutes just to talk about it. So behind me, you can see on my screen there's a PSA Profitability. It is a book that I published, or that I wrote, called PSA Profitability, and it's basically the ultimate guide to choosing, implementing, and using a PSA tool for maximum profitability. So it talks all about how to choose a PSA tool. Also talks about how to set up your burden rates, all of that kind of stuff. There you go. Michael Godwin said you can buy it today because Amazon Day is giving discounts on the Kindle version. So I'll have to have stern words with Amazon, because they don't give me very many royalties. So hopefully the royalties are going to come out of their discounted side, not mine. But anyway, thanks for buying it, Michael. I really appreciate it. And and hopefully if you guys have any questions, either reach out to Matt directly, or reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help wherever I can.
Yeah, that's good. There was one other question here from Jeremy. He's asking a Kanban question. So he's saying he's noticed that in Autotask, when you enter time, you can set to send that time entry or note to the ticket contact. Maybe there's a number of different people you can send it to in that dialogue. But I think the ticket contact is one of the most common. And you can't do that in Kanban when you use the when you enter time in Kanban. The reasoning is that they don't have a way to do that easily in the APIs. That's why we haven't provided it yet. But that is one of the more common things that our Autotask customers have been asking about. And that's why it is something that we want to do this quarter. So that's actually another thing. So I mentioned something that we want to do before the end of the year, which is escaping me now, but that's another one. So those are actually, that's another thing that is in our roadmap, hopefully for this quarter, meaning by the end of the year. We want to be able to, specifically when you make a time entry or a ticket in Kanban for Autotask, to be able to send it to the ticket contact. And if there's other folks that you typically use that you want to send that out to, then wait for that update. Use it for the external contact, and if there's other people that would be helpful, once we've built out that functionality, then it might not be too much harder to start sending it to others. But we'll start with the external contact. Okay,
cool.
I think that wraps it up. We're right on time here, I think, and yeah, thanks everybody for attending. And again, if you have any questions, or if you want to get signed up, just one last thing. If you haven't used Kanban, you want to try it out, you can get a one-on-one demo. Go to topleft.team, and top right corner, there's a get a demo button. So that we'll get in touch. You can put your own demo in our calendars at a time that works for you, and we'll show you everything that you might want to know about that. See how it can work for you. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Excellent.
That was good. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. No problem at all. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, we'll speak to you all soon.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
you
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.